Hey guys, and welcome to the Creation Podcast. We're gonna be talking about a couple of theories that were shown to us during our classes. We have three different theories, which are the Time of Creation, the Genesis, and the Creation. We're gonna be making a quick comparison between them and introducing what are our beliefs and what is the closest to what we actually believe. So, if Atlas, if you want to start.
Hi, I'm Atlas, and I don't really believe in a God, but much of a higher being or higher intelligence that created our universe and Earth. But I also believe in Darwin's theory and more factual evidence of how we came here. Yeah.
My name is Andrew Kawa. My belief is I don't really care to have a belief. Whatever is out there that's out there. I'll find out what happens after death, and so that's it.
Okay. Hi guys, it's Pamela. I'd say my beliefs lean more agnostic, I don't really necessarily believe that there is or is not a God, but I'm always open to experiences or any concrete proof that maybe there is a higher power that I should believe in.
Hi, my name is Jasmine. As a Christian, I believe everything began with God. In the first chapter of Genesis, it talks about how God created light and separated it from darkness on the first day. It also mentions how he made the sky, land, plants, animals, humans. Right at the very beginning, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, it says, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth." Later in verse 27, it says, "So God created man in his own image, male and female, he created them." To me, that just shows that we were created with purpose, that the world was made for a reason, and that it all started with him.
Hi, my name is Mandy. For me, it's a little different because I grew up in a mixed household where on my Latino side of the family, they grew up Pentecostal, whereas my mother and my household grew up as Catholic. So I see different views of God, but on the same time, growing up with my mother and in a Catholic household, I believe in God and what the Bible says. And on top of that, I grew up within Sunday schools and doing my sacraments of baptism, communion, and confirmation. And because of the beliefs I grew up with, I feel like the book of Genesis is closest towards my beliefs, because as this being one of the stories in the Bible that everyone learns, I find it very interesting and always rereading the story and learning the deceit of the snake towards Adam and Eve and how it was first the original sin towards the Bible.
Excellent, and this is one, the first voice that you heard. I always try to be neutral, accept every theory, because we don't have an absolute truth. I gotta say that I'm a huge fan of the Hand of Creation, because it's always a question about everything, and we're free to decide what is gonna be our answer. With all this being said, knowing a little of our background and where we tend to, I want to ask you guys, do you think these myths that we were reading, or anything specific that you know from the past or your background, is this just imaginary stories, just fantasy, or can you translate that to a reliable source of information to explain where we come from?
To imperfectly, but try to answer your question, Juan, due to my beliefs as a Catholic, I feel that the hymn of creation itself is a viable source of information, because not only is it like a translation of the book of Genesis, but there is literally order for order on how the world came to be, and that can't just be a coincidence on how both the book of Genesis and the hymn of creation say how the world was created, in a specific order. So I don't think it's just an imagination, but more of this actually happened. I'm just gonna put it in my own words though.
Well, if I may answer to that directly, I feel like when we analyze the Hymn of Creation, we see that this is directly a text that is asking us to question ourselves. If you compare it to the Genesis, this one is stating facts and telling you exactly what happened. That's why I found the biggest difference, because it's not the Hymn of Creation is not trying to explain what happened, but to make yourself question or create your own theory of the fact. And that's what I like about it, the freedom that it gives you to be able and create your own theory against the Genesis, for example, which is just a statement, which I can just I see it as a fantasy or a fact, depending on what I believe.
I definitely agree with you, and I kind of have like a similar like answer to that, right? To me personally, I think these three pieces of literature can be a valuable source of information for guidance, but I think in to up to anyone's individual like what's the word, like idea, it could be just fiction as well because it won't go along with their personal beliefs, right? Like someone could read the creation or the Genesis and be like, well, this doesn't really add up to what I believe in, so to them it would be a piece of fiction. But to anyone else that has that similar values or beliefs, they would see this as like a literature of their own and like a source of guidance and morals, I guess, in a way. Yeah.
I agree with what Alice was saying. I feel like when we look at the hymn of creation or Genesis, for example, because those are both works of scripture, I think it really depends on the person and what questions they have or what answers they're trying to find. Because I think more specifically for Genesis and the Bible in general, I feel like maybe a book like that was written so that, back when it was written and we didn't have all the answers that we have today, people could read it and take from it what they needed, maybe morally or, like value-wise or anything. But then when we look at the hymn of creation, I feel like the point of it, like Juan was saying, is to make you question, make you come up with your own answers, if that makes sense, because of how vague and open-ended it is. And so I feel like depending on what perspective the reader is looking for, they could gravitate towards any of the readings.
I agree with what you're saying. Hymn creation mostly connects with me because I like the degree of uncertainty. Because for me it's you don't know for sure, so you can't be like exact or certain with your questioning. But when Atlas, when you said about if they don't like something, they can put it in their own words. That's how I feel about the creation and religion in general, because I always find it hard that the people in a religion may believe that God is unfallible, but humans are. So over the years, humans can use it for corrupt purposes and changes it over time to fit their own needs. For example, King James is a different iteration of the original Bible. I forgot what I was supposed to say. Yeah, that's it.
So with this being said, guys, and knowing your position towards what is known and what is written, let's go to a more literature part and think about God as a character. What are the traits that you make him like him or dislike him? What you see that is similar within the text, and how you explain him as a character?
For me, I really like God's figure and all of the literature, but one thing I've noticed that in the hymn of creation, that God is not really a character he's a character obviously, but they don't really directly mention him. I think they call him the One or something, right? And his identity is more so being questioned if he's truly here or if he's not. As in, where is it? The last line in stanza 7, he only knows, or wholly he may know not, which just basically saying if he is truly a figure, then he does know the creation, and if he is not, then he doesn't know the creation. And how in the Genesis he is actually mentioned and is talked about and is the main point of the story.
I feel like throughout the three texts, there isn't really much of a difference between the representation of God as a character and more so as how the creator created the universe, in a sense. Because throughout the three texts, we see repeatedly mentions of, creative force and fertile power, whether that's in the hymn of creation or in the beginning of Genesis, it starts with God created the heaven and the earth. And then also in the creation poem, it starts with God stepped out on space, looked around, and made a world, right? So I don't think the texts are trying to get us to question the differences between God as a character, but rather how this creator created the universe and then what happens before and after that.
If I may jump into that, I have the sensation that this is a one against two stories. As I mentioned, the time of creation is letting us interpret what this figure might be. The Genesis and the creation is telling us what it is. I gotta say that what I like the most from a character perspective is how human he is. If you make an analysis of the Genesis, you see how they mention that he needs to rest, and I thought he was like almighty and wouldn't need that, or how he may show fear when they forbid Adam and Eve from getting the fruit, because the only thing that separates us from animals as humans is knowledge and morality, basically. So was he scared of them to become another god? But those are really good questions that make him a very human character and made it like very interesting, and also like make it clash with the ham of creation, where we can create our own version of what this character might be.
For the him create, I also agree that it's also a one or two. For the him creation, it feels more like an idea or concept rather than an actual being. And compared to James Weldon and Genesis and the creation and by James Weldon, Genesis, he feels more like a commanded being and kind of feels like where he's given the right word, God. And from the creation myth, the first line was that the creation by James Weldon, the first line was, and God stepped out on space and he looked around us and said, I'm lonely and I'll make a word. They gave him a humanizing perspective, but also feel like that humanizing perspective is how can I say this? Yeah, that it makes us more personifies.
Mm-hmm.
It personifies God too much compared to us, and also I have to disagree with Juan's take on that humans and animals are separated, because I feel like as humans we have high intelligence, but that's the only best part about us, because I think because of that we have a very high idea of us compared to other animals and other life forms on this planet. Because when you really look at it, human beings, we're not much different compared to other animals. There are animals that have their whole world. There are animals that use tools like humans. There's insects that have a whole kind of communication network, like bees, ants.
In my perspective, I feel like in the hymn of creation, the author doesn't provide a clear answer about how the universe began. Instead, they ask questions like what was there before creation, how did everything come to be, and who created everything. Whereas in Genesis, it clearly states that God was the creator of the universe and that everything began with him.
Well, thank you all you guys for the perspectives and points that you shared with us. But we're gonna need to wrap it up right here. Thank you so much for listening to us. Have a great day.